You're listening to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast, the show that's dedicated to raising consciousness and empowering you to activate your highest potential. I'm your host, Magda Freedom Rod. Greetings, my beloved Rainbow Warriors. I'm coming to you today from Bali, and I have a very special, it's not an interview for you today, it's a very special piece actually. This is Dr. Vandana Shiva, and this is a lecture that she gave at her ecofeminism retreat that I was lucky enough to be at her Navdanya farm in Dehradun, India. And this is a very interesting lecture, and she goes very deep on a lot of big subjects. And I think from hearing her in her lecture style, when she goes on her rants, you can really get a feel for her passion and the depth and the breadth of her wisdom, which is just massive. She is such an extraordinary human that is doing so much to save our seeds and to save our food system from globalization, from the corporations, from Monsanto. She is just really one of my biggest sheroes on the planet. And I feel so graced that I got to be on her farm and see it firsthand. And this interview was recorded with me sitting basically at her feet. And I'm just so grateful that I had that close access to her. If you didn't hear my interview with her from that same trip, please do go back and listen to that as well, where I get to ask her some specific questions in regards to conscious eating. And we talk about yoga for the earth. And I'm very, very proud of that episode. And I encourage you to go back and listen to that. But on this one, she talks, she goes deeper into ecofeminism. She speaks to artificial intelligence. She talks about how the US election happened, electing Donald Trump. So many nuggets in this one. And she references a few of her many, many books, including Soil Not Oil, Water Wars, The Green Revolution, Staying Alive. I mean, this woman is a force of nature, and we are so blessed to have her on this planet. And I encourage you to listen to this one. It is a bit long. It's about an hour and a half. So listen to this one on a long drive or whatever it is that you do when you listen to your podcast. But she really drops a lot of wisdom in this, and it's a very rich episode. So I invite you to listen to the whole thing and enjoy it, and maybe have a notebook and take some notes, because she touches on so many amazing subjects. So please do enjoy, and don't forget to share it. And if anybody wants to make a donation to the podcast, I might be able to hire an assistant, or I'm looking for an intern, someone to help me stay up to date with my website and my show notes. I'm a little behind on that because I'm just not bringing in enough on my donations here to be able to do all this work on my own. And I really need to get some help. So if anybody wants to jump in and help me with some of this behind the scenes, a little bit of website work, I'd appreciate that, or make some donations so that I can actually hire someone and get some help. This is a lot of work. This is a labor of love I've been doing for almost 2 years now, this show, and I'm still out of pocket on it every month. So your donations are really appreciated for me to be bringing you this really valuable information. So thanks for that. And I hope to be bringing you season 8 very soon. This will be the last episode for season 7 here. I do have one more lecture from Dr. Vandana Shiva that I would like to post as well, but I will do that probably as a bonus episode later. So I'm going to probably take a little break after this, and I'm getting ready to go back to India. And it's funny that I've been doing this India episode now while I've been in Bali. And now I'm about to go to India and produce the Bali episode. So I'm bringing you a little bit of all my favorite places every week on the show. So stay tuned to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast Instagram account for announcements about what's coming up next. And that next season of Bali episodes is going to be It's so rich. There's so much abundance in these interviews that are coming up for you. It was all the Bali Spirit Festival that I recorded earlier this year in the spring. So stay tuned for that. My beloved Rainbow Warriors, thank you again for tuning in and for being a part of this tribe. And if you guys aren't noticing, I am also really have activated my Facebook group, the Visionary Lifestyle and Podcast Facebook group. And I'm doing live streams in there every single day. So if you like listening to me and you like my rants about conscious eating and meditation and yoga and all these things, I'm actually teaching, and you can actually be there and interact with me every day. And that is really, I'm super enjoying that. And I would love to see you guys and interact with you live. So please do jump in there. I will include links in the show notes once I can get to those. And also just a little announcement that I have opened the doors for my Panchakarma retreat in Rishikesh coming up this March, which will be, guys, my 50th birthday. So if anybody wants to come to India and do the deepest cleanse of your life and literally clean out the crap from your body and your mind that you've been carrying around forever, you're ready for a fresh start and you want to go to the motherland and hang out with me there and help be a part of celebrating my 50th birthday, I would so love to have you. Drop me a line, shoot me an email at guide@visionary-lifestyle.com, or you can always reach out to me on Facebook or my Instagram accounts. My private Instagram account is visionary_lifestyle_guide. Please follow my adventures. I'm posting stories there every single day. I have so much food inspiration to share with you. Conscious Eating 101 inspiration I'm sharing there, all the food that I'm eating as well. So please do tune in and stay in touch with me. And if you want to hang out with me in India, grab your spot because they're going fast. I just opened the doors actually 2 days ago and it's almost halfway full already. And I've got another 4 months before that happens. That'll be March 9th through 21st. It'll be a 12-day retreat and we'll do 10 days of Panchakarma. So if you're not familiar with that, go back and listen to my episode with Dr. Moria, my Ayurveda Charya there in Rishikesh, explaining what this process is. And really take my word for it. This will be the 3rd year that I'm doing it on my birthday. And I've made a commitment to myself to do this process on my body, this deep detox and restoration, that I'm going to do it every year on my birthday because it is just such a powerful gift that I give myself. And I really invite you to come and share that experience and be supported by me, an amazing group of people, and Dr. Moria through this really life-altering process. So without further ado, I share with you today a lecture by Dr. Vandana Shiva at her ecofeminism retreat on her Navdanya biodiversity farm in Dehradun, India. Please do enjoy, and namaste.
Makes it look extremely natural, that greed is natural. That a divided society between a 1% and 99% is inevitable. That artificial intelligence and robots are inevitable. Interesting, I was just reading, McDonald's tried to have a robot for frying what's that thing they put in a McDonald's burger? A burger. No, not the patty. The burger. Patty. They had a whole robot created so that the people who are in low-paying jobs for frying burgers, they can get rid of even that. On the first attempt, the poor robot failed. Even in a bad job, like frying a bad burger. Forget good cooking. They'll never be able to do that. Over both my growing up, as well as my learning, I've realized that nature works through cycles. Yeah. A river just doesn't flow. At some point, some of the water evaporates, some of it comes down as snow, and we have glaciers, some of it comes down as rain. And then it recharges the rivers, and they recharge the wells. And yet, the mentality is, and I have a book called Water Wars, where they're talking of two things of a river. One is that she's only in control when she's raped through building dams. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers in America, when they started building dams, they used those phrases. And the other is she's just that much water and energy to be extracted. So my wonderful state, where we had the Chipko movement, to protect the forest, to protect the rivers, and to protect women's knowledge and work. A few years ago, the dam builders who had been driven out of India, because I think in the 90s we had a big global mobilization against large dams, and a World Commission on Dams was created, and everyone realized it's a bad idea, big dams. There are better ways to conserve water, and yet they've come right back, in the recent years. And there's a dam that started when my dad was posted in these mountains. They said it'll last 100 years. I don't think it'll last 100 years. The silt is so high that there's an island that's come up in the middle, and the leakages are so high because these mountains are extremely, they're not rocks. The Himalayas is a very fragile system. The water goes down so fast that in the winter season, it's terrible. You see these ghost villages come up. You see the terraces, you see the homes that were all buried in there. But they started calling the state, our state Uttarakhand, the Urja Pradesh, which means electricity from dams. 2013 we had a big disaster linked to climate change and the dam building. I won't go into detail, but if any of you want to know and see, Kimoti, who's the one who takes care of the farm, he did a lot of research at that time. And wherever there was a very big landslide, it was the blasting for the tunnels for the dam. And we've got a very powerful report of that time, as well as a film my son and his team made. I mean, the mountains were still slipping when they went up to film. There was no electricity, nothing. And they made this film called After the Flood, in which you can get a flavor of what the power of these rivers can be when they are in an angry mood, and they can be very angry as a part of the ocean. And I always say climate change is the earth screaming, because we don't listen in her silence. And maybe now, with her screaming, some people might wake up. You had asked the question to Lalita ji about the sea level rise and the erosions of the coast and the displacement. I think there are so many constructs that are quite recent in human history. The worst of them are about 200 years old. Some others are 500 years ago, when the colonialism started. 200 years ago, the fossil fuel. I call fossil fuels a mistake of digging up what nature had buried deep down over 600 million years. And if she wanted us to use it, she'd have it all on the surface. If she put it so deep down, she said, hands off. And we thought we were smart. Now, and it isn't that the oil companies that control the oil discovered oil. Indigenous First Nations in America used to have a little bit. They used to use it for lighting lamps. Burma, they used to have oil deposits. They used to use it for small things. People knew to put a limit. And then Standard Oil got created. The robber baron age got created. Now, so many of the countries are creations for oil. Earlier creations for colonialism. When I look at the map of Africa, and I said, no, this is not what Africa looks like. Straight lines, chopped up. Why? Because the Europeans were sitting up there in Europe, and then the Belgians were saying, this part is mine, and the French were saying, this is mine. And I was saying to someone, the Gambia, a river like that, they just chopped it up, straight lines. Nature does not work in linearities. She works in circles. And she works not in closed circles, but ever-expanding circles. That's why it's not a mistake. This is the symbol of Pachamama, the earth goddess, that they gave me in the Andes. When I think I was in Peru for a big seed festival. So it's a circle, but it's an ever-expanding circle. And the Navdanya symbol, this is very interesting, because the Navdanya symbol, as you know, is the logo is like that. And this was an artist. I told him this is what work we are doing, conserving biodiversity and make a nice design. So he had given two samples for me. One was a tree with people in it, the people tree, very beautiful, but a bit complicated when you make it in small. And the other was a 9, but a seed giving right to life. And I said, this is perfect because Navdanya is 9 seeds. So the 9 and the seed in germination is perfect. We hadn't even printed anything. I just chosen the design. I went that summer to Finland for the conference of Nordic women before the Beijing Women's Conference in 95, 96 it was. And at the end of my keynote, they gifted me a lovely little box. And I open it and I get this ring. And I said, how did you know? You know what? I said, this is going to be the logo of Navdanya. We don't know what Navdanya is. We know your work, we don't know Navdanya. And the artist made this. Exactly the same design.
Wow.
And it's interesting, this phenomenon is called serendipity, but is the name from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's original name was Sarandeep, the island of peace and harmony and resonance. Now, of course, it's an emergency because the Buddhists and Muslims. Killings everywhere. And here's beautiful Buddhism as a religion of compassion and peace, but in the hands of human beings who claim to be Buddhist by religion, whether in Burma, where they're displacing the Rohingya, or in Sri Lanka, there's massacres taking place. Again, it teaches you how much of it is a layer we add. It's not in our nature. It's not an essential quality. So nature works not just in circle, but not in closed circles, but ever-ending circles. And our little bit of role in this amazing earth as a member of the earth community is not breaking those circles. That's our work. And join. So when we do that, there are no boundaries, there are no linearities. All the lines that become countries are a child of recent wars, colonialism, or grabbing resources. If you look at the Middle East, none of those countries existed before oil. They're all oil countries. The House of Saud was found and appointed as the royalty of that place. And that's why they've never ever kind of lived for the earth and with the earth, because they weren't there as rulers before that. And just like I was so surprised to see Gambia in the middle of French Africa for the slavery, I was invited by the King of Jordan 15 years ago. And I looked at their map, because they were taking me far away to see an ecological community. And I said, you look like a saucepan. You look at Jordan, it's a saucepan. Why? Again, because the oil had to be extracted and taken down by the British. Because the colonials were fighting over the oil. And even the wars, we assume the wars just came up independently. But Hitler is a child of oil. Because the Germans had worked out and they were going to control some oil fields. But Standard Oil wanted them. Baku oil field in Eastern Europe. And this very, very good book that was given to me in the Middle East. I was there for a literary festival. And when I talked about my book, Soil Not Oil, and other things, and they gifted me this book, it's called Carbon Democracy. Yeah. So coming back to your question, since these lines have been artificially drawn by us, since the extraction from the earth is disrupting the cycles of regeneration, and its extraction is the same extraction that extracts from the earth and people, and in the process has to make some people disposable. Yeah? So in a fossil fuel model of the economy, everything is about extraction. And therefore everything is about invading those places where some of what you've defined as a resource is. I wrote an essay for a book that was conceptualized by Ivan Illich, an amazing thinker for those who haven't read him. Please do read Ivan. And we put together a development dictionary edited by Wolfgang Sachs, another dear friend in Germany. And the way it came out is, let's just take a word that is so dominant at that time in the development discourse and go through its history and changes. And because I work on ecology, I was given the word resources. The word resource meant that which resurges on its own again and again and again. The same meaning that is in the word bija, the seed. Bija. Ja is life. Bija is that from which life arises on its own forever and ever and ever and ever. Perenniality is in it, like you have the amaranth chapatis today. The word amaranth comes from amar, both a Greek word and a Sanskrit word, meaning perennial, forever, everlasting. So whenever it's a cycle, it's everlasting. A river doesn't die till it's mined. Soil doesn't die till its soil fertility is mined. And these artificial boundaries go hand in hand with this extractive machinery, which also said women are useless, right? At that point, they just put us in the back seat. And now there's a huge epidemic of extermination of women called female feticide. My sister is part of drafting of a law to make it illegal. In India, we still call it female feticide. There's a measure where for 1,000 boys, how many girls are there? And they usually measure it, I think, up to 2 years of age or maybe a little older. And in certain areas where the so-called growth and so-called development is highest, the proportion of girls to boys is falling. And according to Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize economist, 35 million Indian girls, and one has a similar figure for China, weren't allowed to be born. Because female feticide is basically selecting the female fetus and aborting. Now, we have a right to abortion in this country. It's not a problem for us. Yeah? But selecting the gender and sex of the fetus, that's a crime. Sadly, there are some blind people who think the right to abortion is the big issue. Oh, you can't take away women's rights. I said, what about the rights of that girl? The 35 million girls. So there's this idea that they are now disposable. So in my book, The Green Revolution, I started to see signboards for sex selection clinics. This was, the peak of the Green Revolution. And in that time, in my section on food and agriculture, in the book Staying Alive, I have then written about how you remove women from work in agriculture, because what are chemicals and machines but removing people? Substituting people with chemicals and machines. Now, suddenly, the chemicals mean all the women's work and knowledge is no more, even though women are the first producers. And I've done a book for the United Nations, for the FAO, that most farmers are women. They wanted me to do a book on women in agriculture, and when I started to look at the data, I found most farmers are women. But when you bring chemicals and giant machine, the women go. So first they're made disposable in work, and then they're made disposable in existence. And recently, as this talk of artificial intelligence will take over, it's inevitable, no one's telling you how much policy is being twisted to make it happen. How much finance is being given. Yesterday I was at, they had prepared a dinner and I was at the Wildlife Institute. The Wildlife Institute is forgetting wildlife. They're being made to believe artificial intelligence will protect the tiger and the dolphin. Data. Because when the British colonized us, they have actually, one of the generals or whoever, he said, we conquered India with a sword in one hand and a yardstick in the other. The sword, of course, is fighting straight. The yardstick is a very brilliant way to put down knowledge. But if you don't have a quantity, and that's why, a phrase that gets on my nerves is evidence, scientific evidence. We have the most brilliant health system in this country called Ayurveda. All the research projects for Ayurveda, I hear these presentations. I'm often called to give a keynote, and I hear the presentations, and the poor people, the Ayurvedic doctors are practicing Ayurveda. The researchers on Ayurveda are practicing fake science. How are they practicing fake? They are being asked to measure. Now, our bodies are complex systems. Whatever happens to our bodies is a complex process. And it's a process that in Indian thought, traditionally, and in my training in quantum theory, we have learned that causality is not a linear phenomena. In mechanistic thought, it's a linear phenomena. I push this glass, it moves. So they call it action by contact. I hit this glass with this one with a force, I can damage it. But I know exactly when I picked up this glass and hit that. That's a predictable phenomena. And that's why Newton had just, velocity, mass, everything. A trajectory in a linear system can work like that. But living systems are complex systems. Complex systems are working with complex pathways at every point. You should see some of the new work being done on what even a little cell and then millions of interactions going on in it. And in changes in any complex system, there are multiple causes and multiple impacts. So one cause doesn't have one impact. One action might have 20 impacts, which is why when they try to say where was the cause of cancer, no, there are many causes of cancer. And similarly, the toxics that cause cancer can also cause autism, can also cause other things, because the system's being destabilized. And its ability to self-regulate is being destroyed. And part of what has happened are two words that free trade has made a problem. First, it's made freedom a problem because, makes it look like the right of someone to destroy someone else is an absolute freedom, which it isn't. Therefore, because people have regulations, that regulating is wrong. And most importantly, all life is about protection. This morning Lalita was talking about preserving. Yeah? We protect the seed. That's why there's seed here. We protect the soil. All of us protect each other. We protect the bees and the butterflies and the birds. And a new word in English was created for WTO called protectionism. So I've just done a manifesto with my colleagues in Europe because they were having elections in Italy and other places, and the young people wanted the ideas distilled. So we just did a draft on economic democracy. You can go to the Seed Freedom website and see the economic democracy. And among the top lines is, we have the duty and freedom to protect. When we don't harm someone else, that freedom is a real freedom. The right to harm is not a freedom. That is violence. So knowing that these linearity, whether it's boundaries of countries, or it's extractive machines, or it's the whole causality gone wrong, my entire thesis was really to go beyond Cartesian causality in two-dimensional space. We work in four-dimensional space. And that's why so much, and four-dimensional space is space, three-dimensional space plus time. And space and time means we're now getting science that's telling us epigenetics, that genes get affected by processes. They're not fixed immutable particles. It's so cooked up, that idea of genes being immutable particles that determine everything you are. There's multiple causation that create the context of what you can be. When I was trying to understand the Punjab problem, And of course I was bringing my quantum understanding to it. And I've written here that if you want to understand the violence of Punjab, you can't understand it in linear causality. You can only understand it in systems and contextual causality. And systems and contextual causality means that it's a context that creates a certain tendency. That tendency is not intrinsic. So, it's not the case that Punjab is a violent society. They've been made violent because violence was imposed on them. And I remember in those days I used to go there all the time, and this is what really, if the hard-earned income of the people or the natural resources of any nation or region are forcibly plundered, the goods produced by them are paid at arbitrarily determined prices, while the goods bought by them are sold at high prices. And in order to carry this process of economic exploitation to its logical conclusion, the human rights of people or a nation are crushed, then these are the indices of slavery of that nation, region or people. Today the Sikhs are shackled by the chains of slavery. Because the Green Revolution was determining what they'll grow, what seeds they'll use, the chemicals they'll use, when the water with the rivers will come. But the people they were shooting were managers of the seed farms, the managers of the Bhakra Dam, people who were part of this new chemical system. There's no religious conflict. This is what was the issue. But because industrial farming is such an important lobby and so powerful, they're constantly changing the narrative and directing every conflict to religion. I understood it while doing this research, but it's the same on Syria. The Syrian problem began with climate change, extended drought, Green Revolution, which had totally depleted the water and left the soils desertified. 1 million peasants of Syria were uprooted in 2009. They moved to the city. Structural adjustment prevented Assad from helping them, because you can't help farmers. And then, of course, there were people waiting in the wings. By 2011, fake groups of religious conflict were created. And then now, of course, you don't even know what that war is, except people are dying. You don't know who's against whom, but you know people are dying. Even in Africa, we've done a manifesto on our soil, our soils, our commons, our future, called Terra Viva, in the Year of Soil, because the boats were coming from Africa in the Year of Soil, that's 2015. And so we looked at Africa, and we also called the Director General of what was the UN Convention on Desertification, and we started to make maps of all of these areas, and it fell into place so quickly. So there's a big lake, the biggest lake in that part of Africa, called Lake Chad, shared by 4 countries. And all this is such a large body of water in the middle of a desert that it supports huge fisheries, huge pastoralism, large amounts of agriculture. Now, because of the history of the region of northern Africa, basically the pastoralists who were always on the move stayed Muslim. The settled agriculturists, where the missionaries could reach, became Christian. As the lake dried up, 22,000 square kilometers started to dry up, and there's just a speck of water now. The fishermen lost their work, the pastoralists didn't have grass, farmers couldn't grow food. Conflict started over water. It was a water conflict, and the solution was stop stealing the water of that lake. 80% was going for commodity crops and chemical farming. We diverted. Water wasn't getting into the lake. And instead of stopping that commodity production, they just said, oh, the Christians and Muslims are in for conflict. And before you know it, you get a Boko Haram. Now the girls are being kidnapped. So there's a constant mutation, a deliberate constructed mutation, to constantly make conflicts that are emerging from our destruction of the earth look like conflicts intrinsic to the hate that is between people. Both are constructs. So for me, ecofeminism really is taking reality into account seriously. You know? It's really overcoming of illusions. You know, when a lot of young people say, what do you say? I say, I didn't even use the word ecofeminism first. It was a wonderful French woman, Françoise. We just showed that the violence against women and nature has common roots, and the liberation has common foundations. And that the common roots are the denial of the creativity, the productivity, the agency, the subject, and turning both into objects of exploitation. With no creativity, no production, no autonomy, no sovereignty. If you look at how this has been built right into the two institutions or two paradigms that rule our minds and our lives, one is what is called the economy and the economic paradigm, and the other is called what's called science and technology. Yeah? I mentioned a bit about how science, as reductionist mechanistic science, was made to look like the only thing that's science, and the rest is absolutely doesn't count. I want to go back to this book. I remember this beautiful, beautiful, it's an Andean poem. I hope I can find it. Yeah, found it. So it's from Andes, which is the place where thousands of varieties of potato grow. And so there's this Andean woman saying, they say we do not know anything, that we are backwardness, that our head needs changing for a better one. They say that some learned men are saying this about us, those academics who reproduce themselves in our own lives. What is there on the banks of those rivers, doctor? Take out your binoculars and your spectacles. Look if you can. 500 flowers from 500 different types of potato grow on the terraces above the abysses that your eyes don't reach. Those 500 flowers are my brain and my flesh. Now this is reality. That our brains have been formed by working with the earth. She has taught us, we have served her. Our flesh is formed by the food we get. For us to deny this would be crazy, and yet they created this divided world. We are not part of nature, we are separate from nature, and then centuries of philosophical work has been done about how do we understand nature. You know, there's something out there, and the books on epistemology are crazy. Because you're now trying to relate to something you can't relate to. Because your definition of what nature is, she's unrelated to you. She's an object out there. You've reduced yourself into nothingness. Your eyes don't know, in Indian philosophy we talked about all the 5 knowings. That we know through smell, we know through taste, we know through sight, you know through sound, you know through feel, which is why hands are healing. You know, this is all intelligence. Now you've denied all of this. This is, Descartes said, got to escape from the body. It's so dangerous. And he created this crazy world, which is what we are living in, the Cartesian world. Descartes said, I know because I doubt. And he knows because he doubts, because he had to doubt his body. He had to escape from his body. And so what did he create? 2 artificial worlds. Res extensa, which is the object, which has only dimension and weight. That's it. Because it's real because you can measure it. And then people like him, always superheroes, who have absolute knowledge. And the knowledge, in his case, came from the brain of men in power connected to the spirit. Only they had access. But you would imagine, okay, he says that and creates a Cartesian science. But Locke said it to create property. So what does Locke say? How do you create property? You create property by mixing your labor with nature. But the next line is, but not the labor of the mule or the serf, which included women. It's the labor of it's the spiritual labor of the owner of the mule and the serf, who is spiritual because he owns capital and power and is therefore connected to the spirit. So you got all of economics shaped by this, all of property rights, all of governance, everything shaped by this amazing quality of spirit accessible somewhere up there, with brains outside the body, the spirit outside everything else, and only a few magical men could reach it. And they worked out a design to ruin everything. So at one level, that process has just carried on. Every step of a new innovation is taking us down that path. And I was very surprised actually to even hear Lalita talk about a century towards extinction. Yeah. She's not active in ecology. She doesn't see all the data that many of us see. It really, kind of, my friend Jose Lutzenberger from Brazil, those of you from Brazil will remember Jose Lutzenberger. He used to be environment minister. He had been the chief of BASF for all of Latin America. And then he realized what harm he was doing. And he became the leading person promoting organic farming and agroecology. Every agroecologist of Brazil has been trained by him. Anyway, he used to show us when people didn't understand what the climate change was and the whole tipping effect. He said, we've been pushing. And we pushed and nothing happened. And all the climate skeptics and all the Trumps are basically saying, we've been pushing and nothing happened. And nothing happened. And nothing happened. Nothing happened till the tipping over happens. And that you can't predict. You can predict it will happen. But when it will happen has a mode of uncertainty to it. Yeah? So, on science and on economics, what's first they declared nature as unintelligent, non-creative, women as non-intelligent, non-creative. And then during the war they needed more money for arms. So they cooked up a number called the gross national product and the gross domestic product. And it says, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So, in a cycle, what happens? I produce something, and then it comes back and I consume it. The earth evaporates water, and then it comes down as rain, and it becomes the rivers. So it's a cycle of production and consumption, going on and on and on. We work our farm, we produce food, we also consume it. So when we produce and consume, we are in circular economies, we are in cyclical economies. But that was all declared to be zero, because they were looking at extracting the resources of society for more fighter jets, more tanks, more armies. And instead of putting this aside at the end of the war, just like the chemicals for agriculture should have been put aside at the end of war, the chemicals made it to the farming systems that are causing so much harm, and the GDP from being a temporary measure was made the basis of finding out what the health of the economy is. And this number, which is a totally cooked up number, destroyed small farms. That's why women say, I don't work. You talk to women, do questionnaire. What's your work? I don't work. Because work is where you sell your labor. So all the work in self-provisioning and independent economies and sustenance economies was reduced to zero. All of nature's work was reduced to zero. Now once you've reduced it to zero, then you've got to do something to pretend you're getting food, to pretend you're getting water. So you've got to dam the rivers. You've got to put the fertilizers. And the whole architecture in our head has been changed. That's why I'm so happy that the king of Bhutan took a very courageous step when they asked him, what kind of development will you have? And he says, I've seen the West, and I don't want our people depressed and unhappy. I'm not going to chase GDP and gross national product. I'm going to maximize the gross national happiness and well-being of my people. And Bhutan is based on happiness. Their planning commission is not an economic planning commission. It's not a growth planning commission. It's a happiness planning commission. Yeah? And they work very closely with us. And the Prime Minister, the last Prime Minister, wrote to me and said, Dr. Shiva, I can't see us growing happiness without growing organic. So will you help us in the transition to 100% organic? And our team still does it. Nathan, who's standing now for elections this October, she spent a long time here. Farmers come here. And the farmers were so surprised because they insisted. They said, we're always told the Green Revolution created miracles. And before we come to your farm to learn, we want to go to Punjab to see. So we took them to Punjab. And while we were in this village, a young boy comes running, say there's been a suicide in that home. Now the fields were lush with wheat like this, lush. And here's a suicide. And they can't understand. They're saying, if the fields have so much, our mountain terraces can't grow so much. Why are farmers dying? Then we explain to them the extractive economy. And this year, I want to share this with you. I haven't shared it with people for very, very long. So when I was doing this book on the Green Revolution, this is very interesting. That's the year, using the violence that had been created by chemical farming, called the Green Revolution, we suddenly started to see ads like this. Today, Punjab has the promise of 100 years of spring. PepsiCo for peace. That's how they entered. They didn't exist in this country. And in fact, in 77, Coca-Cola had been thrown out for cheating on taxes. And then these guys say, we're going to create peace. But they came in with tomatoes and potatoes. Within about 10 years, it was all failing, but Pepsi was collecting for one, because our laws were strict at that time, but for 1 kilogram, the farmer was the farmer was being paid 50 paise. And Pepsi was getting 10 rupees from the government as an incentive. Happened, it went, it's over. There's no potato, there's no tomato in Punjab. But they spread potato everywhere. And I'll give you an example. I mean, we work in Bengal. I think a year ago we were having a meeting and farmers couldn't come because 12 farmers had committed suicide, potato farmers. So the whole team cancelled its trip and stayed back. This year, we know where the Ganges and the Yamuna is here and the Ganges is in Rishikesh and Hardwar. And the two travel all the way and then they meet in Allahabad where the Kumbh will be next year. Mm-hmm. This is the most fertile land of the world because it's got so much silt brought by the rivers over millennia. Prosperous farmers because the earth gives so much. And I've cited data here that for centuries the productivity never came down. The Ganges and the Yamuna brought all the silt. It's called Doab. Like Punjab is the 5 rivers. This area is called the 2 rivers, the area between the 2 rivers. But I like. Pepsi started introducing potato here. This year, a sack of 50 kilograms of potato was selling for 10 rupees. And a 20-gram packet of junk food chips was selling for 20 rupees. Just do the calculation, the percentage of difference. Now, this quite clearly, of course, creates huge profits for the Pepsis, who don't pay anything for the potatoes, which now is for raw material for them. And we said, no, food is food. Food is not raw material. And as it's being made raw material, its value is being devalued. People are not getting real food. The earth is being killed, and we are falling sick. So I could make out that the calculations were very cooked up when they said higher yields in Punjab, high yield, more production. And I realized totally cooked up. Because they were measuring output of commodity and only labor as an input. But the input of fossil fuels, of the chemicals, of the capital, of the debt wasn't even being counted. So I did a little thing which started in Navdanya. This was 95. So it's about 8 years after Navdanya. And I said, no, we must calculate the true wealth. And I made this sheet, big sheet of everything that grows on a farm. And everything it's used for. Every tree, every animal, every plant, everything. And I called it biodiversity-based productivity rather than monoculture chemical productivity, which is fake. Out of this grew a whole assessment of 200 farms, comparing chemical monocultures and biodiverse organic. Across the board, more production on ecological farms. Then we converted it into nutrition. We said we don't grow food for being a commodity that's traded, of which 90% is not even in the food system. It's in biofuel and animal feed. Most of the soya of Brazil that is destroying the Amazon, or the soya of Argentina, it's animal feed and biofuel. So we said, no, this is about nutrition and health. So we did nutrition per acre calculations, taking those tables and converting them into nutrition. We could feed 2 Indias by protecting the earth. We could feed 2 times the world population by protecting the earth. And then we still, constantly doubting Thomas's, it's not economic, farmers don't earn enough. So I said, now we must measure the real wealth per acre. Partly it rhymes, right? Health per acre, wealth per acre. But wealth, original meaning is what?
Well-being.
Well-being. The state is the state. The state of well-being is wealth. It was turned into money. Then money was mysteriously turned into capital. Capital is nothing but another name for money. And when our dear Locke says creation of property is not the ones owned by those who have the money, that's where the mystery of capital gets created. Capital is made mysteriously creative. So you start getting returns on investment, as if when you give care, there's no return on investment. It's a different investment. It's not investment of money. Have you ever seen discussion of forms of investment other than money? And everything is now foreign direct investment is the secret. Everything has to be destroyed for a foreign direct investment. So we did this, we took those same tables that were, collected from farmers' fields in this, consolidated in this in production, turned into this in nutrition. And I'll just show you a glimpse. But across the board, every nutrient is higher in the biodiverse ecological system. And what's a biodiverse ecological system? Where nature works and we work with nature. A biodiverse system of different plants is a pest control system. Nature does the pest control. A system where we recycle organic matter. Nature does the soil fertility. We don't create the soil food web. We just give a little bit of food. We share a little bit of food with all those amazing billions of organisms. We give them food, the rest they give us. And they give us nutrients that we never put in the soil. Similarly, people, they still have this machine view of the body. But we don't eat neurotransmitters. So where do they come from? The food we eat is converted by our gut microorganisms into all kinds of proteins and enzymes, and they do the work to make our brains function. Which is now they're talking about the gut as the second brain. That wonderful Peruvian farmer was saying that already. That's where our brain is. Every cell, everywhere. Every aspect of life is intelligence. And if there's one harm and one violence that capitalist patriarchy has done to our beautiful earth and to us as human beings, has been to make it look like all bodies, the earth's body, our bodies, are all unintelligent. And I might find station, hopefully. I'm picking up some of these books after 10 years, so I apologize if I don't immediately. Here it is. This is a German, Bachofen. Well known or not well known? Anyway, the triumph of paternity brings with it the liberation of the spirit from the manifestations of nature, a sublimation of human existence over the laws of material life. Maternity pertains to the physical side of man, the only thing he shares with animals. The paternal spiritual principle belongs to him alone. Triumphant paternity partakes of the heavenly light, while the child-bearing motherhood is bound up with the earth that bears all things. That reclaiming is all we need to do for the earth and ourselves. It's a fake spirituality. It's a spirituality of it's a fake spirituality justifying domination, violence, exploitation. Making it look like the earth does nothing, we do nothing, our bodies do nothing. And it's like I said, every text that is the architecture, whether it's how do we govern ourselves, how do we create property, how do we have knowledge, how do we create wealth, all of them are based on this fake idea of the spirit accessible to few people. When it's the pervasive unity of life and creation. Now the same thing is now the big issue that is what made me start Navdanya. The same crazy idea of creation has come into the idea of owning seed and intellectual property. So if they created a production boundary saying if you produce what you consume, you're not producing, it's only when you steal that you are producing. In a similar way, if you have knowledge that you use, you're not knowledgeable. But if I steal your knowledge, I am creating knowledge. So my book, Biopiracy, I wrote it before biopiracy was happening, but I said this is what's going to happen. You create intellectual property on life, you're going to negate the life in the seed and the intelligence in the seed. You allow intellectual property on life, you'll allow stealing of all the farmers' varieties. And that's why I created the word biopiracy that's now actually in the text of WTO. And I must tell you a very, very enjoyable. In the office you'll see a photo that's actually in Chandrasekhar's area called Agasthamuni, where in 1999 we had organized on 5th of June a living democracy movement to deal with all of this patent question and pesticides, and 200 villages had joined. Before that they had had discussions in their villages, and then they came together and we made a living democracy declaration which they collectively wrote. I'm not going to run to the office to try and find it, but you'll also see other posters, and maybe they should all get the patents on life, the tree poster. And part of what we did after that was spread that movement across the country. And at a particular convention we organized 6,000 villagers came for living democracy. It was about, we are part of the earth, we are an earth family. We're going to protect our forests, our trees, our animals, our goats, our soil, our children, their future. We will not allow the privatization of our commons, including our seeds. And we will not allow anyone to impose laws on us that don't come from this earth. It spread, we stopped privatization of water in Orissa. It was amazing, just amazing. And in this convention I remember a person from Gujarat saying, till we went through this process, where part of it was becoming aware of what what the biodiversity and what it gives you, they said till that we were always going to government like this. We don't have this, we don't have that, we need a bridge, we need a road, give us this, give us this, give us this. Minute we went through this process, taking our biodiversity into account, all that it gives us, we now go to the government like this. We can give you this, and we can give you this, and we can give you this. on our terms. You know? So biodiversity economies is what Navdanya has actually created. And they're all circular economies. And in these circular economies are farmers who have sovereignty over their seed, who have sovereignty over producing food, who have sovereignty over the market. Because they're not dependent on a predatory market of the 1% that gives them 1% and keeps 99%. But are shaping what's the fair. And for them what they're growing is nourishment. And we have very complicated forms where farmers have to first tell themselves, this is what the right thing for me to grow is. This is the amount my family needs. This is the amount I can circulate in my local economy. This is the amount I can send somewhere else. So when Navdanya gives support for marketing, we only take what's surplus. In an extractive economy, there's a pseudo surplus. Everything everywhere is a surplus because it's up for grabs. So with this circulation, what we did was, with the wealth per acre, we said, let's count all the costs left out. At that time, we just counted social costs, that we've lost 300,000 farmers to suicide because of debt. All the livestock poisonings, the pesticide poisoning, the fish kills, the honeybee poisoning, these are all government data, somewhere or the other it's there. And then there are now ways in which people are calculating the contributions of pollinators of the We added it all up, and it's $1.26 trillion of externalities every year for chemical farming alone, in India alone. And I got the agriculture minister to write the foreword. Now we are working a lot on food and health. There's a book that Neha will show you. It's called Annam, Food as Health. But if we take the disease burden of this agriculture model, first you're growing commodities, you're not growing food. So you're already losing half the people who are hungry today are farmers. Hunger is an externality of this model. The epidemic of diseases, the graphs are like this. For every chronic disease, first of all, infectious diseases are not the main killers anymore. The main killers are now diseases that are created by our context. The environment, its poisoning, our minds, our stress, as well as the fact that we are eating toxic food, which is nutritionally empty. And the figures are 2 to 2.5 million cases every year. And when they say it's in the genes, it can't be in the genes because you wouldn't have an increase. Yeah? And 1,300 are dying each day in India. Cancer. Still, now notice, we have a book, Poisons in Our Food, and if you look at the cancer clusters, Punjab, where the worst chemicals are, they have a cancer train. It's Bhopal, where that pesticide leak took place in 1984, and it's Kerala, where endosulfan was sprayed on cashew plantations, just because they felt smart having an aircraft to spray poison. Because that is the illusion of modernity. Bigger instruments for more violence is considered progress. And I remember this so clearly when I was trying to put together the organic movement of this country. Some of us came together who found this so wrong. Punjab had shown what damage was being done. And we were in Gandhi's ashram, and Gandhi was really a deep apostle of peace and non-violence. And at his ashram, we are finding pesticide use. So I asked the secretary of the ashram, I said, how can you be spraying pesticide? Have you totally forgotten what Gandhi said? And you know what he told me? He said a few years ago, a French scientist came and he sprayed. And when he sprayed, the birds fell down and the bees came down, and we were so impressed with the impact. I said, as Gandhians, you were impressed by violent impact? And you've lost your capacity to see non-violent creativity? That day, of course, the ashram joined us in our movement, and they become organic. But this display of violence is considered action. And the creativity of maintaining, renewing, reproducing life, whether it's in nature or in human beings, is treated as passivity. Nothing is happening there. It's dead, it's inert. And this is the main illusion that we have to transcend. Because as long as we fool ourselves with the display of violence as power, we will not be able to experience Shakti, the non-violent power that is all-pervasive. And someone asked me this morning, you asked me about the bindi.
Yes.
So let me just conclude with that, and then we can have a few questions. So, everyone in India used to say superficially, it's a marriage symbol. And I wasn't going to wear a marriage symbol. So I never wore a bindi. And then I was in the Pondicherry ashram of Sri Aurobindo, and I think my sister was visiting, and I was reading things in the library, and I read this amazing book on Shri, the goddess, the feminine energy of the universe. And it was basically a beautiful analysis of how everything can be represented in multiple form. So you want to see a Ganga as a goddess, you make a goddess of the Ganga. You want to see the Ganga as a living river, you see the Ganga in the living river. And in a similar way, we can have mantras. You were in the yoga session, you did Om, the primary, first sound. So you have mantras, icons, and yantras. Yantras are the geometric mandalas that represent different energies, the chakras. But all chakras are combinations of circles and triangles. The Shri chakra is the highest. More triangles, more circles. And in that it says, but every triangle is 3 lines enclosing a space, and every line is a moving dot. And a circle is an equidistant circle drawn from a center, and that's a moving dot. I said, wow, geometry class 3. That is why the dot influences everything. And in quantum theory, my actual teacher for quantum theory, from whom I learned so much, was David Bohm. But he was in England and they had no fellowship, so I went to his student in Canada and did my PhD with his student group. But David Bohm had a brilliant word called enfoldment. And unfolding is I unfold the book. Enfoldment is that which is latent and in potential and will express itself with the right context. So this little dot is an enfoldment of the universe. And in a similar way, each of us, with our energy, limitless energy, because the energy we are part of is limitless, we are in enfolding of another power, which the world needs desperately right now. So each of you, just do whatever is your place, your work, to allow that expression for yourself, but as well as those around you and the earth.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
That was great.
What would you say what we have to do next, all of us? What would you like to say? What do we have to do next?
Well, I don't ever prescribe.
Yeah.
I share.
You share.
I've shared. And I think getting rid of the illusions and the coercive power behind those illusions, which make those illusions look inevitable and natural, is a very big part of our work. And the worst expression of these illusions right now is, oh, these guys were brilliant, they became 1%. Mr. Facebook, Mr. Microsoft, they're brilliant men. It's the illusion of our times. They're all robber barons of our age. Just going to their work. Where are they making money? Stealing. Yeah? Look at Amazon. Just stole publishing, stole books, and now you might have all the 20 shops having a happy community, made unviable because one thief sitting in Seattle knows how to evade taxes. He doesn't pay taxes. You know, he builds, you can't have all those goods. He doesn't materialize goods. He's not that kind of a creator. He ships goods around. And he needs warehouses. He doesn't pay taxes for any of his warehouses. He just got India's laws changed. The GST is Mr. Amazon law. So his trucks can move without paying any taxes anyway. Not being stopped. Yeah. So one is this inevitability of the 1% holding the wealth of the world and conquering it in whatever way they want, changing our laws, changing our constitution, and that whole project is called free trade. The response in Europe particularly against globalization and against Europe is part of that frustration, but they don't know the processes of globalization. So instead of organizing to create economies of care, economies of peace, economies of love, what they're doing is blaming the migrants and the refugees. European politics and American politics is driven 100% by the arrival of refugees who are results of the invasion of their lands and their resources. Yeah. So, if we realize so much of these divisions is to facilitate that exploitation, it would be so good to look at our world, pre-colonialism. What did people call their land? Nobody had flags. You notice? Nobody had flags. And there were no boundaries. There were margins, you know. We knew, like, the word Hindustan comes from the land beyond the Indus. That's all it means. It's defined by a river. It's not a religion. The British created it. We got a whole political system defending it. Totally cooked up. It's about a river. The religion is deeper, and it had many names. The expression of Shakti being one of them. So, reclaiming our being of the earth, our being members of the earth, is a very important piece. Because it's only through this will we learn again how to live at peace with the earth. And it's only by doing this will we realize there's well-being without predation. Yeah? And when we do that, we'll realize it's our common home. First of all, we won't invade other people's lands and uproot them. We won't take actions that makes them vulnerable and turns them into refugees, either of wars or of climate. And if, for some reason, there are refugees, look at the number of people who've moved from Europe all around the world during and after the wars. Did people at that time say, no, we won't accept refugees? Everyone was saying, we'll take them, we'll take them, we'll take them. Even in Bengal, even in India, when the Bangladesh war took place, there are 2 giant settlements in India for the Bangladeshis. At that time we were broader in our thinking. We could find space. Now suddenly we've shrunk in our thinking. And the greed is so deep that every bit of land in farmers' hands is now treated as property that should be owned by the speculators. So, if we root ourselves in the deeper reality of which we are a part, then many of the questions we asked and the limitations created by fragmentation and separation, they get answered at a different level. Yeah? And that's the main work we have to do now. And of course, besides that, actually go out and serve the soil and grow a bit of food and save some seed. I think that's work we should all do. You know, when I was in Costa Rica, I was taken by a common friend, Fabian, to see the pesticides spraying in the pineapple and banana areas. And we took this little pledge. I think he did a video. We said either the earth will be destroyed for our conditions, or we will turn this earth into the paradise it is meant to be. And our work to recreate the paradise on earth is both concrete, it's real. It's about growing our food, cooking our food, transforming our food, but it is also about shifting our worldview. For me, that's all for ecofeminism is. Not a line on which you walk. It's an opening of consciousness. Yeah.
So how do you guide future generations? Like, I come from Silicon Valley, and yeah, they all talk about artificial intelligence, Facebook, Google, everything, Amazon. And the kid, I have a son, young son, right? So they are all into, oh, this is the future. How do we guide them to, root this into, this type of...
Organize a group from Silicon Valley youth
Okay.
to come to the farm and stay a few weeks. Yeah, I think one little Earth University exposure.
Yes.
Don't tell them it's to learn.
Yeah.
Tell them it's for fun.
It's for fun.
In the process they learn. Because they're so arrogant, they think they have to teach the world.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they feel that they're
I think the future is
smarter
Hamara.
than humans.
The
That's
future.
what my son tells me, that
What?
Artificial intelligence, it's going to be so powerful. They can think faster than humans. So it's like, sometimes
See, that's where they've got it so wrong because of the construct.
right.
Because what is artificial? I mean, first of all, the word artificial intelligence is a wrong word. It should be called machine programming. That's all it is. Now, certain things, it looks like they can do faster, but those, the beings in our gut, which are called the second brain, are more, in the root of one plant, there's more neurological activity going on. Than in an acre, there's more activity than the entire internet and the World Wide Web. Yeah. So, intelligence is a very accurate word. It means, it's derived from interlegere, the ability to choose. A machine programmed to do something doesn't choose.
Right.
Yeah? It doesn't choose. It repeats the instructions you've given according to an algorithm you have fed it with. And all the assumptions that went into that algorithm. Yeah? Now it can repeat that out, but we are not just the brain here. We are the brain in the gut and the brain in our bodies and the intellect brain with the brain of those bees who look at the amount they work. Can you imagine if we took the amount they fly and convert it into work? We'd get exhausted. Yeah? So, this is intelligence. The bee knows, and when we spread neonicotinoids or all kinds of electromagnetic waves, the bees lose their ability to know where to go, how to fly, etc., which is why you're getting the big crisis. All of this is intelligence. Yeah? Now, we have to reclaim living intelligence. Just like I said, no, it's not good enough to talk economy. We've got to now know which are the killing economies and build living economies. It's not good enough to say democracy, because if your algorithms can help someone come into power, which is what happened with the US elections. I don't know if I mentioned it. Not yet? No. So basically, what happened was Facebook took all the Facebook posts and sold them to an algorithm company called Cambridge Analytics. They're friends of Trump's. I think Mercer or something, Robert Mercer is his name. And then they put 4 words for hate to select out of these posts. Then they clustered these posts into invisible constituencies. Right? This guy doesn't like blacks, this guy doesn't like women, this guy doesn't like Muslims, and this guy doesn't like migrants. They targeted 4 hate groups and bombarded them with advertisements to again coming back to the potential, the hate was at this level. With Facebook and analytics and the advertisements, it reached this level. And they went enthusiastically and voted. That's how the election was won. But there were 3 steps of deliberate feeding hate. The algorithm didn't do it. The algorithm was used. All tools man makes are used by man. No tools have power above man. And the problem with capitalist patriarchy is, in order to give power to the men who create tools to dominate and exploit, tools are made to look like they have their independent power and they can't be stopped and they have to be worshipped. What is being called artificial intelligence today is to start worshipping the next level of control. It's about surveillance. It's about making money out of something I could do myself. If you look at what is Monsanto and Bayer and all of these others, and they're all merging, what are they talking about? They're talking digital agriculture. Now, does a digit in a computer come and grow your food? No, can't do it. It's too complex. So what do? They take the soil data by linking the tractors and machines with, they call it spyware. So here's this tractor moving and it's collecting soil data. That spyware is sending the data to Monsanto. Then an algorithm is putting all this data together and turning it into what they call big data, the new oil of the future. Then they're selling it back to the farmer who could have known his soil. Needn't have known it with quantification, because good farmers know their soil.
Yeah.
With feel, with smell, with touch. But even if you have to, we have a soil lab here. You can work out the soil food web, you can work out the soil chemistry, you can work it all out. You can work out the soil moisture locally. You don't have to send it all to St. Louis. Then Monsanto's bought the world's biggest soil data corporation, and it's bought the world's biggest climate data corporation, and it's bought 17 Silicon Valley companies. And they're now depending on selling data. But with it selling the chemicals, and with it selling the GMOs, and doing all of that, of course. They're talking just for insurance, because then they'll say, no, climate change is coming, and we have the climate data, because there's an attempt to prevent public access to climate data. Governments will still collect the weather data, but then they'll sell it or give it. And there was a private bill brought in US Congress for this. It failed that time. There's which is the weather company? What's it? AccuWeather. AccuWeather wanted a monopoly on weather data and climate data. Well, sooner or later they'll create a situation where all the climate data collected is available for them. Then they tell the farmer, we'll tell you what the climate will be like, we'll tell you what your soil is like, we'll tell you how much nitrogen fertilizer you should apply, and you will have to be insured. They're looking at $3 trillion just out of insurance. Now, again, it's about reclaiming. What is our insurance? Our insurance is our relationships. Our insurance is our ability to have ecosystems that are resilient, our ability to have communities that are resilient, and our own resilience. That's true insurance. Again, taking it all and putting it in the box of money and someone else's knowledge to control us. That digital economy they want to talk about is at every level. Facebook tried 2 years ago to take over this whole sector, and we had a big movement in India. I mean, big movement in the sense I was the only one from agriculture. Everyone else was from the free internet movement. It was an enclosure of the internet. We managed to stop him. But they're desperate. They're so desperate that every seed that can reproduce itself should be theirs. All the soil that can renew its fertility should be under their control. Every independent farmer, every independent woman should not be able to do what they can do. That's why the whole issue of childbirth has been a big conflict for so long. But now, if you look at old temples in India, and I'm sure even in other cultures, all birth was squatting, because the easiest way to push. But because then when doctors took over, you had to lie for their convenience. Yeah. And it's the stupidest way. You can't push when you're lying like that. And by the way, next year is going to be 100 years of the creation of the International Labour Organization. Yeah? It's older than the United Nations. And I'm thinking a lot, working with colleagues in Europe, on how in a time where 99% people are being told you'll be disposable because artificial intelligence and robots will run the economy. How do we redefine work? How do we reclaim work? And I think we have to bring it back again, and this again is the ecofeminist issue. Where does the word labor come from? Where does it come from? That process of giving birth is the origin of the term labor. Creating anything was working and labor. Then they created the fossil fuel system, the factory system, where they had to capture people to force them into mines and force them into factories. Labor then became that which they can take from you. Is the part of your human being that is appropriable by the exploiter. That became labor. And now they're saying, we've used you enough, we squeezed you enough, now you're useless. We don't need you, we don't need workers, they're the ones voting in anger. We don't need you, we don't need future generations. This is the time to do something very simple. Understand our capacity. First of all, understand the illusions. And secondly, understand our capacities to co-create and co-produce with the earth. And then with very little, we can do so much. At that end of the farm, because too many people say, oh, can you feed the world? And you have all this, but still, can you see this 1 acre? Most Indian farmers are 1 acre farmers. They could be earning 4 lakhs. No farmer should be in debt. No farmer should be committing suicide. Because working with the earth is the true prosperity and the true abundance. And the economics is there. And that work is what we have to reclaim, the capacity to work. Because that too was made to look like the burdensome thing. Yeah? Reducing women's burden, they keep saying. Yeah? Yeah. There's a very good book by, I think, a woman in MIT or something, and maybe in the Boston College, about how the more they've tried to save women's work, the more women are working. Yeah? Because earlier, you had your vegetables here, you had your kitchen, your kids went to a school next door. Now, to go to a Walmart, you drive 20 miles. Then you drive 30 miles to drop your kid to school. And it just goes on, driving. And the more labor has been saved, the more the women are working. Yeah.
So one of the questions was, what can we do? And I'm sure we're all pretty like-minded and we'll do our best, and we all have the same kind of values. But if you've experienced the kind of corridors of power, and have you got an example of a kind of powerful capitalist man? Because I'm sure in some respects he might think that he's doing the best, that capitalism is a mechanism to improve people's well-being or life. Whatever your opinion is on that. But have you got an example of where someone like that has been convinced that maybe that's not the right way to go about things?
Well, I know a lot of very successful business people. In fact, Anita Roddick and Gordon Roddick have been here and taught a course when she was still alive. And they're an example of doing business in a different way. Yeah? So, again, the idea that business means exploitation of the earth. Business means leaving someone else either dispossessed or poorer. That business doesn't have to work that way. But the sad thing is, with this free trade globalization period, those who do business caring for the earth and business caring for others are the ones who very often are being left out. I mean, people like Anita Roddick and all did well because they were ahead. And there is huge area for people wanting to not destroy their health, their bodies. Body Shop was about not destroying your body with all the synthetic stuff. There is a huge market now for organic. And my worry is that organic left to the market will then be reduced to the privileged. And what we do in Navdanya, by combining the economy of care, the economy of sovereignty, is make sure organic is available to the last person. First the producer, their families, local economies, and that's what we all the time try to think. How do you create a system that is beyond this apartheid of constantly polarizing society between, you see, earlier it used to be the nasty things were done by the rich. And by trickle-down effect, they reached the rest. Who ate white sugar in Europe? The rich. Yeah? The industrial sugar was eaten by the rich, so everyone else started to eat sugar. White bread was eaten by the rich. The rest started to eat white bread. Now we are at a time where the rich who started it all are saying, no, we'll have nice, hand-baked, good bread from organic wheat. But the rest can't afford it because it doesn't produce enough, etc., etc. They can eat the toxics. And for me, that's unacceptable. Because our bodies are the same. Yeah, they need the same nourishment. And by the way, I was supposed to have had a lunch with a very important lady this afternoon, but I thought you all were more important. Mrs. Macron is in town in Delhi, and they want, an invitation for lunch. So, okay, let me take it back again. For me, this power within is the highest power, including for me, personally. All external power and superficial power, it's not that I treat them with untouchability and I hate them or anything of the kind, but I don't give it too much importance. If it allows you to do something good, I'll do it with them. I've just finished a book with Nicolas Hulot, the Environment Minister of France. And it worked, we've done it. But if the French push that Jaitapur nuclear plant, I'll be standing with the people in Jaitapur.
I have two questions. So when I try to think practically about a large-scale change, I think about political will, which right now in Latin America and most countries in the world, they're shifting to conservative governments. So you cannot really count with politicians to do that kind of change. And then I think of organizations like Greenpeace and United Nations. I would like to know your personal opinion on those organizations, and if you think they're like organizations out there that are doing an excellent job that we could like start following. And my second question is, and it's, I'm from Rio in Brazil, and I've been living in New York for 3 years. In New York, you get organic food very cheap. In Rio, it's extremely expensive. It's like what you said, it's for the rich. It's not for the poor or the middle class. So do you know what happens? Because when Brazil is so huge, it's so much land, it's so fertile, and yet there's like organic products are not reaching people, and people want it. So I don't know, would like to know your opinion on it too.
Well, Rio is the place where the big Earth Summit happened in '92.
Yes.
And I was very much there, played a big role. And I worked very closely with the UN, both in the lead up to the summit, as well as in the follow-up to put laws in place for biosafety, GMOs, everything. I will still go. I went for the Paris Agreement. I will go off and on, but I don't think that the real work is changing what I call commas and full stops in UN treaties, because that's what's been, that time we could make a quantum leap, where the movements of the world united, governments that cared united, that scientists, it became one big confluence of energy for change. Right now, it is a period, like I said, of fear of regulation. And there's more attack on UN treaties now. After all, the Copenhagen climate treaty was dismantled at Copenhagen by President Obama, not by President Trump. Because everyone thinks President Obama did everything right. No, he came after receiving a Nobel Peace Prize and said Gandhi would have supported war. That's why I'm supporting the war in Iraq. And then he went and got the 5 polluters together and said, let's not have an international treaty. Let's have our own voluntary commitment. So the treaty was killed. That's why France had to do the Paris Agreement. It's not called the UN treaty. It's just a Paris Agreement. So there's a period of dismantling. And there is also a period of the need for lots of real action. Yeah. When you said what happened to Brazil, it's very interesting. So my little son, he was very tiny when he came for the Earth Summit with me. And I think I was there 3 days before because I was giving university talks. And in the evenings, he'd go off to the beach in Rio, Copacabana. He'd run off on his own, yeah. And we used to be constantly told, oh no, don't go alone, don't. He'd run off and play football with the street kids. And was such a happy child. And the 3rd day he came back in tears. And I said, what happened? He said, they're all gone. And he stopped to ask the doorman. He said, where did the children go? And they said, leaders are coming. Rio had to be cleaned. And they were put in trucks, military trucks, and dumped 300 kilometers out. Nobody knows. So it was cleaned of people. But why were the kids on the street? Because over the years, while you had dictatorship and other things, rural Brazil was being dismantled. And you were creating very large-scale industrial systems for sugarcane. At that time, soybean was not a big product. But a lot of the rural people were made landless. And this struck my boy so deeply that when we returned home, flights to India arrive at 2 in the morning. And he just wouldn't get off the balcony and come to sleep. And I said, you must be tired. We've traveled all the way from Rio. And he said, no, I want to wait for the vegetable vendors to come down the street. Because in India, everyone has something to do. And in India, all the doors are open. At that time, we didn't have gated communities in 92. Today, we have police at the gates and everything that we'd seen in Brazil introduced now here because of that economy of economy that creates this polarization of wealth. And that polarization, if everything is a circle, then even when you extract linearly, but it has to become a circle. So when you extract fossil fuels and you make plastics, the fossil fuels become greenhouse gases. The plastics go populate the ocean. They don't disappear. They become a circle of pollution. Yeah? Similarly, you take resources from people. You take their right to work. You make them redundant. They don't disappear. They're wasted people. They're insecure people. And as this economy of creating precariousness has grown over the last 20 years, particularly with globalization, the precarious people have increased. Now, some precarious people are finding alternatives. Yeah, lot of young, innovative energy going on. The others are going into despair. So just look, like I talked about chronic diseases, the graphs are like this. Look at drug addiction, the graphs are like. When you're in that much pain of meaninglessness, how do you cope? Why is the opioid crisis so big in America? In rural areas, in unemployed workers' areas. They're coping somehow with a life that's become unlivable. Now, the more that happens, the more insecurity you get. And then you get a marriage of convenience between those who'd like to maintain the inequality but tap the anger to make that inequality bigger. Because you get people busy fighting each other. Along every line. Right and left, religion at every level, women and men, faith, color, everything becomes a line. Our diversity, instead of being a diversity of celebration, becomes a line of separation and division and hate. And it's being engineered in that way. So it's not, Latin America was a period of dictatorships, which is when inequalities were created. Then you had a period of democracy. Now we are entering again into a period of totalitarianism of different kinds, and with it the hate politics. And we have to live through this period, because time too is a circle. She's not linear. Kali is not a line. Kali, the goddess of time, is about the birth of new times and the end of bad times. So one, never essentialize. Never essentialize. Brazil is like this. No. Brazil was something else, it can become something else. No? Nothing is a fixed entity. That is a construction. Everything is a flux. Some manipulated, which is why we have to shed that manipulation. Some reacting through insecurity. And that's why the issue of our knowing, our consciousness becomes very important. Heavy stuff. But you know, this heavy stuff makes you light. And there's easy stuff that makes you heavy.
Thanks so much for answering the call to be here today. I'm so glad you're part of our tribe of activated rainbow warriors. If you found the show in any way empowering or inspiring, I would be so grateful if you would share the show on social media or with friends and family that you think would benefit from these conversations. And also, rate and review the show in iTunes. This is really the very best way to help support the show and help us get noticed by others who are looking for the sort of content that we're sharing. Now notice there are no outside ads playing here. That's because the show is supported by you, the listener. You can become a patron of the show with a small monthly donation by checking out the perks on our Patreon page at patreon.com/visionary lifestyle and signing up there. There's also a one-time donation button on the podcast page of the website if that suits you better. And just so you know, your donations help to cover the necessary out-of-pocket monthly expenses to produce the show and will also help us grow so we can inspire and educate even more people. And hey tribe, I'd love to hear from you. Visit me at visionary-lifestyle.com and please tell me your comments and questions. I really look forward to connecting with you. I love you. Namaste. Today's episode is brought to you by the Conscious Eating 101 e-course. This is a 6-week online course aimed at empowering you to make food choices that are in alignment with your values. The program is based on ahimsa, also known as non-harm, and helps you make every bite that you take an expression of love, self-love, animal love, and planet love. The course offers 15 lessons and 20 nutritious and delicious recipes and is offered over 6 weeks that you can do at your own pace. It includes lessons like plant-based nutrition, protein, dairy alternatives, the story on sugar, GMOs, label reading, and many more. If you're looking to increase your health and happiness, balance your weight, reduce your footprint on the planet, and align your food choices with your values, or are interested in being part of the solution to huge world problems like climate change, rainforest destruction, and world hunger, then this is the course for you. If this speaks to you, please check out consciouseating101.com today.